Rory Hoskins, thank you so much for joining us today. Mayoral candidate for Forest Park, correct?
Yes, I'm running for re-election as mayor in the village of Forest Park.
Awesome. Thank you for taking time to do this. I think part of one of the reasons I wanted to do this show is just to get more involved from a civic perspective here in the community. I live in downtown Chicago, and I know a lot of people. I hear this constantly. We're all interested in politics, but a lot of times we talk about it at a national level. We don't really necessarily have too much influence at that level, but we certainly do at the local level. And you are a huge part of that. And you've run for you are currently mayor, or you were mayor in the past. Can you give us a little bit of a background of where
Sure,
you sit?
I was elected mayor in 2019, so I'm finishing up my first term and I'm running for a second term.
Awesome.
Before I became mayor, I served as a village commissioner, which is similar to being like an alderman or a suburban trustee. I served 8 years as a village commissioner from 2007 to 2015. But to answer your first question, I'm running for re-election as mayor.
Okay, awesome. And we chatted offline, and the way I found out about you actually was from a conversation about politics, and somebody had mentioned you and that you had a very unique message, and that you're not just focusing on mudslinging and name calling and the kind of like the I think the typical politics of the day, which is we have a huge problem. It's this person's fault, and everything's falling apart. And it's like, you actually are doing things. You're finding compromise. I think there's a park project you were working on that we were talking about, but things within how you dealt with COVID, the way that you've done some stuff in the police departments as well, and your view on that. I just wanted to have an open forum conversation to provide the voters and people watching and listening, whatever medium you're choosing to do this on, some information as to who you are and what you're trying to get the message, or what your message and your platform is. And it's hard to do that in a 2-minute news segment. Sure. That's always the problem with those forums or even debates. You get a minute to talk and then a 30-minute response. It's just, you can't unpack complex topics in 10-second sound bites. It's not possible. So dealer's choice, where do you want to start today in the conversation, sir?
So first of all, my name is Rory Emmett Hoskins. And I only say that to say I have a website, roryhoskins.com, right?
Awesome.
If anyone needs a little bit more information about me biographically or my record as mayor, they can go to my website, roryhoskins.com. It's all one word, RORYEHOSKINS.com.
And we'll put that in the description too, and we'll flash up on the screen too.
Fair enough. So yeah, it's been an honor to serve as mayor in the village of Forest Park these last 4 years. When I was elected in 2019, the village was kind of in a place where we had a lot of unnecessary division. In 2018, there was a referendum on video gambling, the slot machines that are in restaurants and bars and whatnot. Forest Park became the only community in the state of Illinois ever to get rid of video gambling machines or video poker machines once the corporate authorities had allowed them. And, the basis for that was that there had been 2 advisory referendums held where people in Forest Park didn't want the machines as a way to raise revenue. So in 2017 or maybe 2016, when I was no longer on the board, the village authorities allowed the machines, even though it was against the prior express wishes of the people. So in 2018, they got rid of the machines. And so in 2019, there was still a lot of division from that vote. It kind of played what you might consider old Forest Park against newer Forest Park. And today, I'm not going to say, video poker is an issue, but there's still sort of a divide between old Forest Park and new Forest Park. I'm being challenged by a gentleman who has served on the Park District for the last 16 years and who retired from the position of Director of Public Works here in the village of Forest Park. So while he worked in public works, that's an interesting kind of experience. It's kind of narrow, right? It didn't deal with maybe making decisions about a fire department or a police department or public affairs related considerations. It was solely focused on moving snow, picking up debris, making repairs, working on sewer systems and things like that. No, it's an honorable profession, but I don't know that it qualifies one to be the mayor, or it makes him the best person and best positioned to be the mayor. So I'm contrasting my background which involves social work. I was a former social worker. Later, I worked in economic development. Spent 6 years working for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Then 3 years in the private sector as an economic development consultant. Got elected to the village board in 2007. Went to law school in 2009. And, came out of law school in 2012 and began practicing law, working in insurance regulation. Being the mayor is a part-time role. But anyway, I feel there's a great contrast between me and the person who's challenging me for my seat.
So you talked about you mentioned about the the gambling video poker machines. I actually used to live in Las Vegas. One of the things that I lamented when I was out there, anywhere you went, there was these gambling machines. It was everywhere. It drove me crazy. And you would walk in, and it didn't matter if it was like 7 a.m. You'd see people in Vegas. You can still smoke in a lot of places. And you'd see people in a gas station or in a grocery store, even in the little walkway when you walk into a grocery store, there's a line of slot machines, and they would just be smoking, chain smoking, and just ripping butts and smashing that button and try to, hopefully, I guess, hit a jackpot or something. And it's a very, I feel like it's a way to give people a pretty horrible false hope that they're going to have a positive outcome. There's a reason why Vegas is the size as it is. It's because the house always wins. So you really don't have a good shot at that. So when it comes to raising revenue, I think there's probably a much more constructive way that doesn't prey on people's hopes to be able to do it. Am I touching on any of the reasons why people didn't want that in there, or is that something for a completely different reason?
I think there were different reasons, right? But the key thing is that the people had previously expressed in votes that that's not what they wanted for the community. But the corporate authorities who served between 2015 and 2019 did not, honor the wishes of the people. They kind of knew better, right? So the people spoke in 2018, whether it's regressive, whether it's not what they wanted for their commercial district. We have a really nice Madison Street shopping district. We call it our downtown business district. It's incredibly diverse in terms of the businesses. There are like little boutiques.
That's great.
There are ice cream stores and bakeries. There's a few bars, but there's some really nice restaurants. And there's a couple of banks. And a lot of places where you see, bars with video machines, there's not really a diverse business district in and around those bars and restaurants. There's just the bars and the restaurants. So in any event, I think Forest Park is a great success story. Since I became mayor in 2019, we found other streams of revenue. We put in parking meters in busy areas of town, and the parking meters make just as much money as the machines did, in 2018 and part of 2019. But going forward, in this election, I think a lot of those divisions from 2019 have been healed, especially because we got through COVID successfully, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody serving in village government expected to, kind of serve with this global pandemic, hanging in the background, right?
I can imagine.
Forest Park is a small town, but it's also a very well-educated town. It's got great people. It's got great institutions. It's got a number of small businesses, and it has a really vibrant business community anchored by what's called the Forest Park Chamber of Commerce. So the village was able to work with the Chamber of Commerce and to some extent our local K-8 school district and other institutions to kind of spread the word in terms of how we are implementing the state's COVID mitigation programs, right? In the early days of phase 1, where non-essential businesses closed, we're able to successfully keep crowds off the street. We didn't have, wild bar scenes of people hanging out in high-risk behaviors. And we all got through it together. And now Forest Park is doing really, really well. And my opponent doesn't really articulate a message in terms of what he would do differently, other than that, he wants to be the mayor.
That's not really a platform to run on. It's just, I want to be the mayor. I want to do it. That's well, what are you going to do? It's like, I want to be the guy. That's not really
his slogan was he wanted to put the park back in Forest Park.
Got it. Was this in regards to the thing that we were talking about with the park? Do you want to talk about that at all? Because I felt that was again, it's like when we always talk about both sides not being able to strike compromise. And here, I felt like that was a pretty solid compromise. I mean, I don't see why there's anything wrong with it. But can you just lay the foundation for what they were trying to do with the park? They just wanted to keep it a park, and there was a potential development there.
Sure. So there's a piece of property referred to as the Altenheim property. We have in Forest Park what's called the Altenheim Senior Living Facility. It's essentially a residence for senior citizens. It's been in town since the 1800s. It used to be much larger than it is today. And in 2004, I believe, before I was serving in the village purchased about 11 acres of land from the Altenheim Senior Living Facility. The land and the land purchase came with what's called restrictive covenants. And those restrictive covenants kind of regulated what, if any, development could occur on the property that the village had purchased, these 11 acres. Now, part of the 11 acres was covered by some dilapidated buildings. There was a crumbling chapel. Again, the Altenheim Senior Living Facility was founded in the late 1800s.
It's a long time
So
ago.
you had an old chapel that was literally caving in. The roof had large holes and it hadn't been used for decades. It was just a structure, a crumbling structure sitting on maybe a quarter acre of land. There was a hospital, the shell of an old medical unit. There was a shell of a cafeteria and one other building. So as a newly elected official, I worked with colleagues in the state legislature to bring back some grant money that would allow the village to demolish those 4 buildings I just described to you. In total, these buildings maybe represent about 100,000 square feet, maybe a little bit more, of dilapidated, hazardous structures. So we knocked those down in 2021. Now, let me back up. I mentioned that the land was purchased in 2004 by the village. So somewhere around maybe 2013, 2015, a group of residents kind of conceived this notion of a big park space. One person even suggested that it would be a mini Ravinia. He used to call it a Ravinia of the West, right? A Ravinia for the western suburbs. Except for this Ravinia, it surrounded a senior living facility, and it was bounded by a cemetery, and it was bounded by a new development of townhomes and condos. So it really wasn't conducive to being like a concert area or anything like that. And so then later they said, well, let's build a park. They wanted to have this luxury park. They never identified any kind of funding source for this luxury park. Meanwhile, you had these crusty buildings sitting over what they thought would be the park. So when the state awarded the Village of Forest Park a $750,000 grant, it was an economic development grant. It was conditioned upon the village undertaking some form of development, what they consider to be a transit-oriented development, because the Altenheim land sits next to the end of the Blue Line, the Forest Park CTA Blue Line station. Mm-hmm. So, it makes sense to put, residential developments next to mass transit, right? Mm-hmm. It's really not possible to simply keep this land as a park, because the grant that allowed us to take down the buildings, and we took down the buildings in 2021, it was an economic development grant.
Just predicated on you building.
Yes.
So you kind of have to build something, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't built anything yet, right? And what I've always said publicly is that the vast majority of the land could be retained as green space, probably 9 acres, maybe as little as 8 acres, but the vast majority would remain open land, and then the village could possibly sell 2 or 3 acres to a developer. It's really prime real estate given Forest Park's location, right? The village itself is 20 minutes from either airport. It's right off the Eisenhower, and you have 2 CTA train lines as well as Metra serving the area. So Forest Park is really a hot location. I think you mentioned earlier that you live in downtown Chicago. A lot of people are moving to Forest Park, from various parts of Chicago, because it's a great place to live. It's a great place to work from home. Mm-hmm. We have all these lovely restaurants that I mentioned earlier. And we already have a pretty nice park system. And we have really reliable services and a great police department, a good library. And it's just a really a wonderful place to live. And the whole issue of, putting the parks back into Forest Park as a campaign slogan doesn't really say anything about what you're going to do, for the town. And it's just kind of, I don't really know what to think of it.
Is there? I mean, is it? I imagine there's a decent revenue for Forest Park to create that type of an like a commercial residential space where you can just jump on the blue line quickly and get into downtown in 20 minutes or get to the airport in 20 minutes. I know that's one of my frustrations about living in downtown is it takes me an hour and a half to get to O'Hare.
Yeah.
It's very annoying. I don't like it. It adds, I mean, it's an hour and a half there. Depending on when I land, it could be an hour and a half home. That's just an extra, 3 hours to the total trip. It's definitely a frustrating thing. Actually, my brother, he moved out way north, hour north of the city, and that's one of the things that because he travels all the time for work as well. It's like he can get to the airport in 15 minutes. Like what a novel thing. So I would imagine it's, especially if somebody lives in the city, starts to kind of outgrow your digs a little bit. You want a little bit more space. You maybe want a backyard. You want to be able to go to a park. You don't want to necessarily be in the downtown area, but you want the same type of feel of a downtown area. I feel like a Forest Park could have that kind of quaint feel to it, where you get a little bit of all sides. You're not like so far removed. But going back to the point I was trying to make about the development, would that not bring in revenue to Forest Park?
It would bring in revenue. It would bring in new residents. New residents are key to a thriving downtown business district, mm-hmm. right? That's how you expand your local economy. And what we find are that people, with resources are coming to Forest Park. I mean, I got a Facebook request this morning from a guy who's a former prominent news anchor, and I had no idea he lived in Forest Park. It was just a friend request, right? I look at the guy's profile. I was like, wow, lives in Forest Park. I had no idea this media personality lived in Forest Park. And that's not uncommon. I mean, we have some really talented people moving here. So we know that the town is going in the right direction. We know that people feel really positive about the services they receive here in Forest Park. A great fire department, a great police department. I get compliments all the time on our police department. We have what's called a Citizens Police Academy, where the police officers take time on their own to talk to civilians, once a week and maybe a 2-hour setting about their work, about what they do, about evidence collection or tactical response, or the kind of training that the police department, undergoes annually and quarterly and whatnot. They kind of explain the role of other emergency response units, their relationships with other departments, and the resources we have. Our residents got to sample, riot gear and things like that, the shields, the helmets, the bulletproof vests. They got to feel how much these devices weigh, right? A bulletproof vest with a radio and gun clips and other things, they get pretty heavy, right? And so some of these officers explained to the residents what it was like to work in 2020 when you had these various social justice protests going on, the vast majority of which were nonviolent, but in some cases they had to respond to, property damage and, what could actually be called riots in places like Waukegan or maybe downtown Chicago or other jurisdictions. But what I'm trying to say is that our police department has a lot of two-way communication with its residents. And that's not probably something you find in a big city like Chicago, right? So people are moving to Forest Park for a reason. They feel really good about the local government. And we're trying to simply maintain that. We're always looking for ways to share information and engage with the public.
That's a great point. And I've had this conversation with a couple people now that there seems that we ping pong back and forth in extremes here and binaries where it's, it's all government or it's no government. And there's a really wonderful place in between that I think we have to kind of come to a realization about. Like, we need government in our lives in a capacity. Like we have to have those types of programs. Like the community has to have a voice within the police department in the same way that the police can actually talk to the community. I don't think that's so radical. I don't think that's a novel idea. If you're living in the community, you should have some type of a voice in it, especially within the authorities of that community. And if you guys are doing that, it's wonderful. And I know that one of my problems, I should say, well, I'll call it a problem. A problem that I have in the city is the taxes go up and up and up and up, and we seem to have a steady decline in some of those services and in some of those things. We don't feel like we have a voice. It's a frustration that I share with a lot of folks, and it's, doesn't matter what you look like, the same conversation with everybody. And I don't think anybody would have a problem paying for taxes or paying for government services if they're operated properly. And that's, I think, one of the reasons people are probably looking to go to a place like a Forest Park is because you guys are doing something very special there. And it's not, again, this isn't rocket science. It's just that if you're giving money for something, you want to have perceived value from it. And that's great. Was that your program that you put in place to have those types of 2-hour sit downs with the community and have those conversations?
So the Citizen Police Academy predates my administration. I wish I could take credit for it, but I'm not going to take credit for it. What I will take credit for is having a good relationship with my police chief. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, the police chief who serves the village. I appointed him, so maybe I use the shorthand "my."
Sure.
Our current police chief, who was appointed in 2022, is a career police officer here. He's been here for about 20 years. Most of our police department, they've served Forest Park for over a decade. They're really dedicated to the town. They tend to know the business owners, the ice cream shop owner, the restaurant owners, the boutique owners, the people who manage the local bank, the realtors. It's real community policing. And so to your point, I think that people feel good about their tax dollars for the most part. And I find that new businesses are attracted to Forest Park. I mentioned earlier that I spent about 9 years working in economic development. So I've seen how things work, and I've seen what appeals to businesses, right? Regulation that's not burdensome, reliable services, clean roads, other services. They make businesses confident in the local authorities, and that attracts other business. So Forest Park has lured restaurants from Oak Park, from Berwyn, from other towns. We have all these new luxury restaurants that are just great for Forest Park. They're increasing the attractiveness of our downtown business district. It's a really walkable community. Mm-hmm. And so you have other businesses that are located next to these restaurants, right? And it's just a win-win. And the owners of the restaurants and the other businesses are engaged in the community. They're members of the Forest Park Chamber of Commerce. And we still have large businesses in town, like Farmington Foods. It's a big meat processor. Ferrara Candy, they manufacture candy. They've been here forever.
I think I know that.
Lemonheads, Now Later's Nerds,
yep,
Black Forest Gummy Bears. All that stuff is produced by Ferrara Candy, and they're a member of our Chamber of Commerce. Weinstein Meats. We've even attracted a new cannabis dispensary coming to town. We have an automotive dealer that's about to build an $8 million state-of-the-art facility to sell solely Jeep brand electric vehicles. It's going to be at the corner of Roosevelt and Des Plaines. Now, given the various tax credits on the federal level and the state level for the purchase of electric vehicles, we expect that to bring really meaningful revenue to the village of Forest Park. And again, it boils down to location, right? We're centrally located. We're right next to River Forest. We're right next to Oak Park. We're pretty close to Riverside. We work well with all of our surrounding communities. All the mayors are friends. All the mayors get together for a monthly dinner. We exchange information about how we deliver services and what gets a good response and what gets a great response, right? And so there's just a lot of intergovernmental cooperation. And that's the story that I want to share about Forest Park and, the time I've served as mayor of Forest Park.
Look, you're selling this place very well. I mean, it sounds,
come on out. Just move west, Reed. Come on.
Absolutely, it sounds amazing. I mean, it's definitely for all the reasons, especially the restaurant thing. I'm a big food nut, and I think that's a mark of a very healthy town is the quality of the restaurants in it. It's actually quite remarkable. I travel a ton, and that's always a thing I've noticed. Seems like some towns that are on decline might not have a very good culinary scene. So yeah, that part for me, very selfishly, I love. Well, I'm curious, why did you get into politics? What got you into even the concept of being like, I'm going to run for mayor. I feel like I
So
can help fix this.
sure, I started off as a soccer coach, right? My wife and I raised 4 kids in Forest Park. One we're still raising. We have a 13-year-old.
Okay.
But the older ones are 25, 23, and 20. The 20-year-olds in college, the others are done with college, and they're off my books. But here's the point. Going back to when the 25-year-old was a 7-year-old, I coached his soccer team.
Hmm.
And after about 2.5 years of coaching, some of the older men in town asked me if I would run for village council. They knew that I worked in economic development. They knew I'd, experience in the state as well as the private sector. And the town's demographics were changing, right? Forest Park is an extremely diverse community. And so I became the first person of color, first African American, first anything non-white to be elected in the village of Forest Park. So I served as a commissioner for 8 years, went to law school during that time. And, over those 8 years, we never stopped being engaged in our kids' education, right? So all the spelling bees, all the soccer games, all the band concerts, the basketball, the volleyball games, the parent-teacher conferences. You see your neighbors, and you build that level of trust. And so when the old mayor decided to retire, he had served 20 years. People wanted someone with experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess they thought I had the sufficient experience.
It's that simple. They just like, hey, you probably the guy to do this. That's wonderful, and I think it's actually a testament to it's like not just some outsider that's coming in like, hey, I can fix this. It's literally as a request of the people that were in the community that were looking for someone else in leadership to replace somebody that was retiring. That's a wonderful story. Are you from Illinois originally?
I'm originally from Galveston, Texas.
Oh,
I moved to
okay.
Illinois when I was in my early 20s. I moved to Forest Park when my wife and I were in our late 20s, and we've lived here since 1999. And so we've met a
Been
good
here for a
number of
hot
people
minute.
over the years. We don't know everybody in town, but we know quite a few, right? And
Yep.
they know us, and they trust us. And like I said, my prior 8 years of service as a commissioner,
Mm-hmm.
it gave me a level of familiarity with the different departments, whether it's public works or the fire department or the police department or the community center or the library, right? We're a small town with not a whole lot of work groups, but we also have, we have unions that represent our employees. And so over my 8 years as a commissioner, I had to interact with the unions because we voted on their contracts. And some of the time when I was a commissioner, I was involved in union negotiations.
Hmm.
So what I would suggest is that I had a broad experience, from serving as a commissioner for 8 years. And that allowed me to kind of step into the mayor's office with enough knowledge about the role and a great staff around me, right? We had a very experienced fire chief, a very experienced police chief, a village manager, and other department heads to help make decisions, right?
So what? So we're coming to the end of the interview here, and I sincerely appreciate you making time to do this. We have your website, which is Rory E. Hoskins, correct? Did I mess that up?
RoryEHoskins.com. That's correct.
Okay, and we'll put that in the description for everybody to be able to go in and check it out. Before we're out of here, closing comments and wrap up. What else am I forgetting to bring up? What do you want to tell the people that are listening, and ultimately that you're trying to get their vote for?
Sure. The first 4 years of serving as mayor has truly been a privilege and an honor. I want to serve another 4 years to continue the good work. I want to see through this Altenheim development. We recently attracted a cannabis dispensary to Forest Park. I want to see that cannabis group actually build its dispensary and begin operations in Forest Park. I mentioned the electric vehicle auto dealership. I want to see that construction completed. There's some development agreements that the village will have to enter into with a dealer, and I want to see that happen. I'm the only person on the council with experience in these development agreements. They're basically revenue sharing agreements. But I basically want to finish where I've started, Reed. I'm also mentoring some of the younger officials, the newer elected officials, so they can step up. We've become a more inclusive village. As the mayor, I'm able to make appointments to various boards and commissions. We have a zoning board, we have a fire pension board, a police pension board, an environmental commission, a traffic and safety commission. So I've tried to make appointments with an equity lens, right, to bring in groups that haven't been participating before, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's Hispanic, whether it's Jewish, whether it's Asian, whether it's African American. We're making our government more reflective of the community, which is now Forest Park. And so that's what I want to continue to do, as well as deliver great services.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, Rory. I sincerely appreciate it. I know it's early on a Sunday. You have other things you could be doing with your time besides just talking to us. So I really sincerely appreciate you making time and sharing your views and what you're hoping to get accomplished. And for the residents of Forest Park, get out and vote. It's important. If you want ultimately a government that's reflective of its people, this is how it starts. We have a lot that we can do to change things at a local level, not so much at a macro level at the U.S. And we spend a lot of time, I think, focusing at national politics, which we really can't influence. But here at a local level, we can get involved and we can do better. And myself included, everybody can do better. Just get involved, be informed, and do your civic duty to get out and vote and take charge of the community. This is wonderful, Rory. Thank you so much for doing this. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening and watching, and we'll see you on the internet. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you.
Absolutely.